Hello, everyone, and welcome back. I am Matt the Jerk here with Dynasty Owner. Today, we're going to get right into our weekly video breakdown. We're going to be talking about the Detroit Lions. So first up, we're going to be talking about the free agents that the Lions had coming into the 2021 season. So I've kind of gotten away from the free agent talk. We know that a lot of the free agents have already been signed. There are a few still for the Lions that haven't been signed, so we're going to talk about them as well. But first up, in no particular order, we're going to talk about Marvin Jones. So Marvin Jones, he had a very healthy 2020 season, actually better than a lot of people remembered, at least as far as I remember. He had 76 receptions, 978 receiving yards, and 9 touchdowns. So a very good season, good enough for wide receiver 18, so very healthy for him. He did find himself a new team in the offseason. Detroit failed to re-sign him, so he was added to the Jaguars team. He's going to be on a contract of 2 years, $12.5 million total, so 6.25 per year. He's 31. He's probably starting to get towards the back end of his career, but his touchdown numbers continue to be productive, continues to be right around that double-digit touchdown mark. So he's going to join our receiving core of DJ Chark, Laviska Shenault, James Robinson, and Travis Etienne. So he'll be competing for targets against them. I don't think he'll be the number one in terms of receptions, but definitely should have over 5 touchdowns, and he's going to be over 500 receiving yards, as he is almost every season. Up next, someone a little less fantasy relevant is Mohamed Sanu. So if you remember, he signed with the 49ers at the end of March. He started the 2020 season with the 49ers, actually. He was cut in October, and then he spent several weeks on the Lions practice squad. They signed him, which is the reason we're talking about now, before he got called up, to start for the rest of the season. He didn't play very much. Wasn't fantasy relevant, like I said. I believe he had less than 20 receptions on the entire season, so not a great season. And even dynasty owners are kind of agreeing that he's fantasy irrelevant because he has a $1.4 million contract, but he's still owned in less than 3% of the league. So just really somebody that you're not able to own unless he shows you something towards the end of his career. A big player we want to talk about is Kenny Golladay. So Golladay doesn't play for the Lions anymore. I'm not going to harp on him too much, but it's worth mentioning, as I've said before. So he signed a 4-year, $72 million contract with the New York Giants, and that was pretty much right after free agency opened. At $18 million per year, he is the 6th most expensive wide receiver to own. And so I threw in this other trivia question. There's actually 2 other players that have exactly an $18 million salary per year. Do you know who they are? It's more of like a beta question. Do you know what people are worth? But so the 2 other wide receivers that are worth $18 million per year, do you know who they are? And I'll tell you who that is at the end of the article. Anyway, so like I said, I'm not going to talk about Golladay too much, more about what it means for the Lions receiving core after he vacates. So it obviously leaves a large void in their core. The top receivers currently on Detroit's depth chart, we don't know if they're going to add somebody through a trade. Free agency is probably unlikely just because we're getting so close to the start of the new season. But depth chart right now looks like Tyrell Williams, he's at $4 million. Rashard Perryman, $2.5 million. Quintez Cephas is just under $1 million. And then TJ Hawkinson, probably the player who's going to get the most, fantasy relevance for this season, is a little less than $5 million. So I wouldn't call this a great receiving core. I'm not sure anybody would call it even really good, to be honest. It's probably below average. I like Hawkinson for the season, but that's mainly because the tight end landscape is just so barren. If there's a silver lining, it's the fact that none of these receivers are really that expensive, including Hawkinson. So, like I said, Hawkinson will probably receive the most work of any of these 4. But feel free to take a chance on any of them. I mean, they're cheap enough, especially Perriman. Perriman 2.5. That's pretty good value for what he has done in the past couple of years. So I'd feel free to take a chance on any of those, especially Hawkinson, but any of the other 3, take a chance on them. And then finally, we have 2 players that have yet to be signed, which is a little rare coming from the same team this late into the offseason. But so they're Danny Amendola and Adrian Peterson. They have not been re-signed by the Lions. It's unlikely this late that they're going to be re-signed by them. Not impossible, obviously, but I look for both of them, especially Peterson. He might go unsigned throughout the entire offseason, and then maybe if somebody goes down, a top running back goes down in a preseason game or even week 1 or 2, he'll be not a good fill-in, but a decent, depth fill-in if that does happen. Unfortunately, it seems like it happens every season. So, and we know that each player is going to retain their dynasty owner salary until they sign a new contract. So whatever they made last season, they're going to make the same until they re-sign. Not a big deal for Peterson owners because he's right at 1 million, a little bit more than 1 million per year, and he's still in 12% of leagues. That's very fair. I mean, people want to wait and see where he lands. They're not spending much to hold on to him, so why not? I completely agree with that strategy. Amendola, on the other hand, is going to be too much of a burden to hold on to. So he'll cost $5 million. That was his last salary. It's a placeholder until he resigns. Like I said, that's just too much. He's taking up too much valuable space on your roster for what his upside is going to be that he could give you in the 2021 season or even beyond. He's owned less than 1% of Dynasty leagues. That's appropriate until his contract situation becomes clear. So with that said, we're going to jump right into one contract breakdown. We're going to talk about DeAndre Swift. So I talked about Swift quite a bit in Opportunities, Almost Everything articles. I wrote those in mid-November. So I have a few excerpts from that. I'm not going to read them out here. You can go through my article and look through them. But essentially what it says is that at that point in the season, I think it was November 11th, DeAndre Swift was the most efficient, as far as my standards go, the most efficient running back in the NFL for any top 35 running back in points scored. So what I do is I take what I call points per opportunity. So I look at the fantasy points and compare them to total opportunities that players get. And opportunities being defined as carries, so running back carries, and also targets, not just receptions, but targets. So how many times a player is getting an opportunity to receive the ball counts as that. And we found that that's a pretty decent way to spell out efficiency. I mean, people are hurt for any number of reasons on the season. People don't play as much as they maybe should for any number of reasons. And this kind of tries to take into account some of those less volume-like players and just show where they would be if they had more of the volume. So what I did was, and I'm going to show this to you, I'll show you this on the screen, is I took all the top 20 players from the 2020 season and put them on a list and looked at their points per opportunity and saw where they ranked. Because like I said, Swift was number 1 on November 11th. So he did drop a little bit. He dropped to number 3. No surprise that Alvin Kamara was number 1. I mean, he had almost 380 fantasy points. And look at how many carries and targets he had. I mean, that's very low, especially when you scroll down. I can scroll down and show you some one at the bottom of the list. So Derrick Henry. I mean, he is the only player on this list that had over 400 opportunities. And that with that volume, you're just not going to be able to compete for the most efficient player. I mean, that's just not possible unless, he's putting up 500, 550 fantasy points. So regardless, Alvin Kamara comes in at number 1, 187 carries, 107 targets. But if you look, DeAndre Swift comes in at 3. So he had quite a bit less fantasy points, obviously, 188.8. But he had significantly less carries as well. So 114 carries, and then right at half of the number of targets. So a little bit less than that. And his points per opportunity. So every opportunity that he gets, he is averaging 1.1 points, which is very good. And this isn't even obviously taken into account. We're not even taking into account salary yet. So at the end of the day, what does this mean? It means that for the playing time that Swift got in 2020, he was very efficient, one of the top efficient running backs in the league. And I know people are going to say, well, as you get more volume, you get less efficient, you have a better chance for injury, or you just get tired. And that's true. That obviously is true. And I'm not trying to, make a prediction that Swift is going to be the most, he's not going to be the most efficient running back in the 2021 season. I'm not predicting that at all. But this is a good indicator that when he does get the opportunity and he doesn't get a workload like Derrick Henry, I don't know if that's going to be sustainable for anybody except for Henry. But when he gets a workload that's a little bit bigger, like I'm projecting in between a 50 and a 60% increase workload for Swift in the 2021 season. I don't see any reason why his efficiency, it's not going to remain the same, but it could be close. And if it is, I mean, he'll be one of the top 10 running backs value-wise for sure in Dynasty owner. And that's mainly what I wanted to break down. It is worth noting too, I wanted to mention, is that there's only the only players that had more than 300 opportunities were Dalvin Cook, Montgomery, Josh Jacobs, Ezekiel Elliott, and Derrick Henry. And then Henry, I already said, had 400 opportunities. So it's just so hard when you have that much volume Yeah, obviously you're gonna have a better fantasy season, but to break into that top tier of efficiency is just not going to happen. So recapping, the main thing I want to get through this is DeAndre Swift, one of the most efficient running backs in 2020, isn't even taking into account his cheap salary, which makes him even more efficient, compared to especially Kamara this year. When you got Kamara and Swift going up against each other, Kamara is probably going to be the more efficient, points per opportunity running back on the 2021 season. But when you look at salary, Kamara is making, right at $15 million, and Swift is making $2.1 million. I mean, it's just not even a comparison. So, like I said, predict Swift's usage will increase 50 to 60% 2021 season. I do expect him to remain top 10 running backs in terms of points per opportunity. Probably not going to be number one, maybe not be top 5, but he should be top 10 if he keeps doing what he did last season. That's pretty much all I want to talk about. I did want to mention, so the 2 other wide receivers that make exactly $18 million per year, if you haven't guessed them, they are Tyreek Hill and Odell Beckham Jr. So they're both right at $18 million. That's it. That's all I want to talk about. And I appreciate everybody watching. Go ahead and read my article that pairs with this video, get a little bit more in-depth breakdown of it. And really, that's it.